As far as I can go, rest assured the way will lead me far from home.
Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Sorry for not uploading over the weekend. I had some personal stuff happen. Regardless, at YCS Houston, they have released the new Yu-Gi-Oh! Ban list. So, looking at what we have here, I know you probably have already seen some from the bigger pro players if you're really into the competitive scene. So I won't go super over the dramatic with it, but going over the cards that we currently have, we're starting off with the unlimited, which for non-Yu-Gi-Oh players who are interested in my content, that means they went from on the ban list to any kind, whether it be 0, 1, or 2, to 3. So now they are fully playable again. Right now we have Cyberjar. Cyberjar is a card that honestly everyone agrees should have just been off a while ago. The game's way past flip monsters at this point. Without the support of something like Mimikul, which has its own unique gimmick. For dangers, we have Jackalope and Tsukunoko come back. Those are surprisingly interesting. Not the most game impacting because they have also been slightly power corrupt as well, considering most decks nowadays have hyper consistency, so they don't really need that outside support. However, for decks such as like Dark World, this could be somewhat of a decent boost to their engine, considering they use non-archetype cards to get themselves running. Ava, Ava has been on the list for a little bit too, mainly because of Drytron. At this point, the deck has branched off into do builds. It's good if you're playing Drytron mainly for the fairies. Otherwise, it doesn't really have a good consistent home, so it's fine coming off the list. Monkey board, personally, I really like that monkey board came back. Huge Pendulum fan. Not, it doesn't seem like it might be the most impactful, especially depending on what kind of build of pendulums you play. It is an instant scale, yes, to be able to pendulum summon. However, I don't feel that instant scale will be as impactful as it had been in the past without outside support, such as potentially Electromite. But sadly, we didn't get Electromite back this time. That is currently all for the unlimited. Uh, the unlimits didn't really change much. Who knows if a rogue deck could potentially really use these. Next, we have the semi-limited. This is cards going from whatever to 2, so that it's somewhat of a consistency hit, so you're not seeing it as often. Usually more so for cards that at 3, is seeing them all the time just become too much of an issue. And with this ban list, we've seen Konami take a different approach than how they normally would over here in the TCG, which is usually if it's an issue, they just try and get rid of it until they feel like they can bring it back, which sometimes is way past its prime, but we'll see. Here we have a lot of stuff to go over. First off, together we have Black Dragon alongside the White Dragon. Both of them good for Chaos Space deck / Dragon Link. I'm surprised that they brought both to 2, honestly. It had been mentioned, someone pointed out they didn't bring back Chaos World to 2. So with that, they might just be trying to give that boost to Dragon Link specifically rather than Chaos decks. And for those who are unfamiliar with Chaos decks, it's just decks that emphasize light and dark attributes. In this situation, those two coming back can be potentially really good for Dragon Link. They don't really still have crazy end board pieces anymore, considering we still don't have Baron, Savage, and Appo over here. However, Jesse Cotton had pointed out that it could potentially become impactful in Malice as a way to get more banishes to occur if too many things happen to Bestial, which there was a Bestial hit, but not too much on here. That will be covered in a moment. Next, we have a hit to the best deck, which is with X, Ice, and Sword Ryziel, all of them going from 3 to 2. Absolutely crazy, considering right now the main core, assuming you play no outside engines or archetypes, was primarily down to about 10 cards consistently, being 3 of each of those, sword bouncing between 3 to 2. But pretty much all of these were very playable at 3. So the fact that they were all taken to 2 heavily reduces the consistency outside of the fact that since you need Ryziels for detonator, you'll be seeing them a lot less without the use of duo drive. And now that duo drive is such a dependent access point to Ryziel unless you hard draw those names, it it is such a huge choke point because now it can get hit with Imperm, Veiler, all the good hand traps. It provides an easy way to disrupt this deck now. On outside of the fact that it was so hand trap resistant before has just become so stoppable by hand traps. It's crazy. In addition to that, second best deck of the format, we have Malice Dormouse, White Rabbit, and Malice in Underground getting from 3 to semi, which is, from what I've heard, very decent of a hit to the deck, considering with it being more of a link based strategy, it doesn't rely so much on having as many in hand to bounce off of. It is better if they do have it. However, since they can tend to one card combo a bit more than Ryziel in the sense of board growth, it is a little bit weaker in that aspect. However, it has been mentioned that they do have a bit of a smaller core than Ryziel does, since they are heavily more dependent on trap cards. So it does mean their turn ones are going to be slower. It still feels as if it is a bit weaker of a hit to the deck than the semis to Ryziel, in my opinion. But they do end up getting more indirect hits further on this list. So the fact that a bunch of the cards were semi-made, very impactful. Past that, we have the Unchained Soul of Sharvara back for Unchained and usable in just Fiend related decks. Ubel potentially got a bit of a buff. I know Sharvara one hard drawing, it kind of sucked. Now you have that opportunity to continue and gain extra resources off of having 2 in deck. Decently impactful, but better more so for the Unchained deck, just because now they have more actual core engine to go through. Then one of the hits, or one of the two of the returning cards that I find personally kind of cool, Ashen Poplar. I know the deck kind of reigned the game for a solid year, but now that it doesn't have access to OSS to be able to use Diabell Star Wanted and Deception as starters, absolutely feels reasonable, especially considering they end up getting an indirect hit in the next portion of the list. So having these back kind of just averages it out, on top of the fact that now hard drawing Poplar isn't a death sentence to the deck, since if you would draw one before, since it was limited, you wouldn't be able to search it to just continue off your combo. But now if you have one in hand, search the second, you're able to just pop off with Ash. It's absolutely very appealing. And then that would be all for the semi-limits. Then going to the limits, this is cards going from anything to 1. Starting off, we have Bestial Druid Worm. Absolutely crazy. Well, I mean, impactful in terms of hand traps, because of the fact that now it makes graveyard light and dark strategies a bit easier to rely upon, on top of the fact that it gives less interaction for a lot of decks, on top of just a potential free body. So it is very impactful, on top of the fact that it means you don't have extra copies to search with Magnuma if you happen to start off with multiple in hand. D-Shifter, that one is absolutely wild. Personally, as a Cash fan, I love D-Shifter. It's very funny. I know a lot of graveyard reliant decks despise this card, so I can understand the hate. Having it go from 3 to 1, just going off the math, the ability to see this in starting hand now has decreased tremendously from, I think it was about like 33 to 12%. So now you won't be seeing this as many games. However, now, as other people have mentioned, it is kind of just a card where if it appears, you're just kind of like, well, your opponent's drawn the card. Well, this feels bad. But it definitely hit in the right direction. Definitely didn't feel like it needed to be banned, but it does hurt because it does resemble that Floodgate-esque hand trap mix that a lot of people kind of despise somewhere along Droll. But Droll hasn't gotten hit on the list, so decent payoff. Next, Masterpiece. Masterpiece coming back. should have come back a long time ago, in all honesty. Now it's kind of just blended in the format, and people have pointed out that it's 2950. Most decks can spit out a 3K within first turn, like no issue. So being resistant to almost every card effect doesn't matter if you get beat out by 50 every time. But it's cool to have the deck back. Very low to the ground, non combo heavy oriented deck. So appreciate the boss monster being back for that deck. Next we have Mathmech Circular. That I'm also a personal fan of, just alongside Monkey Board. I'm so happy to put that back in my Cyverse deck. I know a lot of people don't like Cyverse because they consider it kind of a soup slash slop kind of deck that kind of just can mix anything from Cyverse together. But Circular absolutely gives crazy advantage body wise, especially considering one of the cards that get banned. To more mitigate Malice's one card combo slash just non-engine extensions. This helps actual pure Cyverse decks kind of recover a bit more from the ban. Ryziel Detonator. That one is crazy. The fact that it went from 3 to 1 means the deck's main goal has become so much like it is not as grindy as the deck was before. Because not only was the deck hand trap resilient, but even if you had actively broke their board, they could just summon a second detonator because every Ryziel player played two. Unless the only time I could ever see a Ryziel player playing one was if they were playing Ryziel Fiendsmith. But even then, they were still playing two. There was no one playing one. And I felt like three was pushing it. Most people didn't really ever need three because by that time, one detonator pretty much carries. If that one dies, you just summon the second one. If you didn't already revive it with Twins of Eclipse based off of like sending it off of X and stuff. So the fact that they send it to one, grind game almost, I don't want to say not existent, but it is heavily reduced by the fact that you are reliant on cards like the field spell and others to like shuffle it back or plug into revive and stuff like that. You're not you're not easily accessible to detonator just from the extra deck on the follow-up. And now it's a lot weaker to unicorn, so let's go cash. Unicorn rip detonator, not an issue. Let's see, next bonfire direct hit to both Snake Eye and Ryziel. Well, indirect, but it makes with with all of the good Ryziel names being semi'd, having Bonfire put to one also heavily reduces consistency. So now if you do want to play the deck, for the most part, you do have to play with 7th Tachyon or Small World. And if you're playing 7th Tachyon, you've locked yourself into Exceed, so you pretty much have to play Pure and you can't play with Fiendsmith. And one thing to note so far is that Fiendsmith hasn't been hit on this list. And you may notice a turn on the next page too. Fiendsmith goes unscathed on this list. So that engine has gone crazy, and it will continue to represent in this format until potentially the next list. Considering everyone also did kind of expect it not to get hit, it's getting most of the core cards are getting reprints in Stampede, so Konami needs to sell their cards. Let's see. Next is Brilliant Fusion. Gem Knights are getting new support soon, so it makes sense. And before it was splashable as an extra normal summon engine, but the game's come to a point where normal summons, as valuable as they are, don't come up as often, outside of the fact that most decks don't want to risk that brick with how hyper consistent things can be, while Gem Knights can actually risk it considering it is in archetype. Crossout Designator. That one I personally do not like a bit because I don't like dealing with Nibiru. I understand the importance to try and slow down the game, try and make sure like, oh, if your opponent has Nibiru, try and not play into it, lines to play around it and such. I don't like dealing with it. I liked Crossout, but I understand why people got frustrated by it. If your opponent didn't actively play hand traps and like bait it out and stuff like that, it was just something to potentially use on your opponent's turn as just extra interaction, which kind of sucks, which is the same reason why Called By was put to one. But this is with it being a card that is also very prediction base, if you're not in a very competitive environment, can make you feel bad if you do the wrong calls, on top of the fact that you can draw your cross out targets, which I do constantly. But despite that, I feel like it was still useful beyond that fact. Next is Talents, another hand trap hate card, just alongside cross out designator. I understand why it was put to one. Unlike cross out and called by, it definitely didn't act as extra interaction in terms of like actively stopping them. But now, if you're a lot of competitive players would use the look into your opponent's hand, rip their best card, and all that hand knowledge is just beyond resourceful. Now the main way to get it is you have to use thrust into talents to be able to just consistently get any advantage off of that. But at that point, other people have mentioned it's just more worth it to go for certain floodgate-esque cards. Go for like D-Berry or something like that. Stop a specific mechanic can be way more impactful than that hand knowledge if you had to choose between the two most of the time. That's all for the limited section. Gonna miss my boy D-Shifter, but I understand. Last up, the ban list. Or the ban cards, I should say. These are the cards going from whatever to 0. So you would not be able to use them in tournament play. We have Nightmare Griffin. Griffin was a very interesting card, very focused on the link mechanic. However, with it not being Master Rule 4 anymore, and decks not having to play Link monsters, so many choose not to, it just kind of sucked matchup wise, especially with Link decks becoming consistently more prominent in the meta scene because of archetypes just relying on that genericness. Griffin was bound to be a reoccurring issue. So unless decks just actively had splashable engines that gave them links like Fiendsmith, even then with Fiendsmith being pricey and the fact that some people just don't want to play it, it means they just fall victim to Griffin just because of circumstance, which kind of sucks. And no one enjoys having that happen to them. Link Decoder. Link Decoder is an indirect hit to Malice, makes it so that you can't have indirect follow-up into combos based off of like the bestials and such, because if you summon Dormouse, your opponent hand traps it, you link into Link Decoder, banish it from grave, and just pop off anyways. It was definitely a feels bad moment, and for a lot of cyberspace decks, it is just extra bodies that can come out of nowhere and get around like specific negation. I personally use it in my Cybers deck for starting off a one card combo into extra link stuff. So losing Decoder definitely can hinder that kind of flexibility. But as forementioned earlier with like Circular, now the decks can play Circular instead, but they won't have that consistent access to the card because it's not in the extra deck. Alongside the fact that Circular, depending on how much value you want to get from it, can prove to be a consistency issue with like the spell cards or playing Factorial, and the likes of getting all you can out of it can just hurt you in the long run. So there's a lot more thinking and risk behind Circular compared to Link Decoder in this circumstance. Next, onto the Xyz, Abyss Dweller. Abyss Dweller was a floodgate with that you had consistent access to, deserved to be banned. Just it presented such an issue to so many decks. Like, I know Rice Heart is definitely way stronger than this, but in a way it's almost comparable to it. And the fact that this card has lasted so much longer is very surprising. Next, and last card on the list is Bahamut Shark. It was a rank 4 that gave decks easy access to an Omni with Toad. I understand why Bahamut was hit, because Toad, for those rank 2 or other decks that can use it creatively, it is an interesting interaction to have throughout games, such as I've seen people already experiment sending it with X and continue to use the Shark engine despite Bahamut being banned. But honestly, Toad, mentioned by others, it's a card that is constantly an issue throughout the game's history. It may not be the most overwhelming threat, but it always presents itself up in a situation where when it comes up, it causes a lot of it causes a lot of situations to be more heavily one-sided. And even though now it is more accessible to a niche pool, it's still a very powerful card. So when it comes up, it's gonna hurt whatever can access it then, rather than just itself having already gotten banned. But at this moment, considering the main reason Bahamut was banned was Ryzel using it, I can understand it. That is all for the ban list. Just as a bit of a retrospect, we have gotten consistency hits to all the best decks in the format. Oh yeah, and Bahamut also was kind of a hit to Mermail because of water stuff. So it also kind of hit that rogue combo deck. Or not rogue, but like lower tiered. But overall, it presented great consistency hits to everything that was controlling the game, except for Fiendsmith, which personally, again, also I'm playing, so I'm happy about that. But I can understand why it could deal with a few consistency hits just to reduce the amount of extra advantage and potential to negates an interaction that a deck otherwise wouldn't have. But Ryziel got hit. Nice. Very fragile now. Doesn't have as much of a grind game. It's more of an upfront combo deck like it realistically should have been, considering it's so low to the ground. Malice, despite it being an excessive combo deck, has become a little less consistent, and with less names has become kind of bricky. So that's chill. Mermail has really only lost access to Toad, but considering it can rip cards from hand, kind of deserved it. Past that, everything else on the list pretty chill. Kind of deserved to come off a while ago. Look forward to the Cyber support. And that's all I gotta really say on this ban list. I hope you guys enjoy the content. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. I am going to continue focusing primarily on Yu-Gi-Oh at the moment, just because it is one of the things I really enjoy, and I'm trying to reinvigorate my competitive passion for it. But anyways, I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to y'all later. Peace.